The Washington Huskies are entering their first season in the Big Ten, and they're going through some massive changes. They lose a lot. You lose Kalen DeBoer to Alabama. You lost a lot of starters to the NFL. And the guys who weren't leaving for the NFL ended up hitting the transfer portal and following Kalen DeBoer to Alabama. And you bring in Jedd Fisch, who has spent the last couple of seasons at Arizona. He did a really good job with that program, led them to a 10-win season and a win against Oklahoma in the Alamo Bowl. And he has a pretty good coaching staff. You got the coaching staff for destiny with Brendan Carroll, the son of Pete Carroll, calling the plays for you on offense. And you got Bill Belichick's son, Steve Belichick, being your defensive coordinator. So you should have a pretty decent defense and offense, regardless of the amount of talent that you've lost, because you are going to be pretty well coached, and you got two reliable coordinators who are going to be pretty good when it comes to their play calling, especially your defense. With you going to the Big Ten, hiring Steve Belichick was a perfect hiring for you, because you have somebody who's going to be running an NFL-style defense. He's going to put a lot of emphasis on being tough up front, being physical, and one of the biggest concerns for Washington is, you question just how physical are they going to be entering the Big Ten, because we know that it's a different brand of football being played in this conference, and their two biggest weaknesses happen to be on the offensive line and the defensive line, and those are two areas that you don't want to have concerns about going into a conference where you just saw Michigan beat Penn State last year, running the football 1,000 times to end the game, and then you got Blake Corn with blood coming out his nose. Like, this is a nasty, tough conference that if you're Washington, even though you did go heavy in the portal to get some more offensive linemen in there, and there were a couple of Arizona guys that followed Jedd Fisch on the defensive line, like Isaiah Ward and Russell Davis II from Arizona to Washington, you still are lacking a lot of talent and depth at those positions. And when you play a Big Ten schedule, you definitely have to do a good job of rotating guys in and out and keeping guys fresh, especially when you get into the fourth quarter of these games. I definitely feel like from a skill position standpoint, Washington is decent. You got some pretty nice receivers, even though you got a lot of inexperience and unproven talent there. You should be good enough where, as long as Will Rogers can play at the level that he was under Mike Leach, I think that your offense should be pretty good, but your offensive line is going to be a major area of weakness. And I get that Husky fans are going to say, man, like, our O-line isn't bad. Like, we got a few guys from the portal. The key to having a good offensive line is that you want to have a lot of guys that have experience playing with each other. When you think of the best offensive lines in college football, most of the times they aren't offensive lines that were built through the portal, or you just have a bunch of new faces as starters. You have guys who have played and started with each other for at least a year or two, because having a good offensive line comes down to communication and having good chemistry. When you have good chemistry and communication, you don't see a lot of missed blocks. Everybody knows their assignments. With Washington, you don't have that this year. You do have really good running backs. You got Jonah Coleman, who is a stud. He was averaging nearly 7 yards per carry at 5 touchdowns. You got Jordan Washington, who also is an Arizona transfer. He's more of their change of pace back. He's really fast, really elusive in the open field. And defensively, the strength of that side of the football for you is going to be your linebackers. You return both of your starting linebackers from 2023, and you got a pretty experienced secondary. But where Washington is lacking this year is up front. And even though I feel like the Big Ten is heavily overrated, you don't want to come into this conference having just good skill players and lacking the necessary pieces on the D-line and the O-line. The good thing for Washington is that I believe their ceiling this year is 8 wins. Their floor, however, is 5-7. Now, the first half of their schedule is pretty manageable. Your first 2 games, you're playing nobody. You play something called Weber or Weber State, wherever the hell that is. Then you play Eastern Michigan. Then you got Washington State, Northwestern. You should easily be able to win those games. Northwestern loses a lot. Washington State, they lose a lot. They pretty much are a G5 they're a G5 program now. You should be able to beat Northwestern And I don't know about you being able to beat Rutgers on the road because we don't know if Rutgers is going to have any good quarterback play, but they do have a lot of guys up front. And not only do they have some dudes up front, but they have some NFL quality guys on their O-line and D-line as well. So that could be a potential loss for you. But let's say, best case scenario, you beat Rutgers. You're 5-0 before you have to play Michigan. And you play Michigan at home, which is a huge boost for you because anytime you're going up against a team that is more superior than you from a talent standpoint, playing at home can be a good equalizer for you. And Michigan, like you, also loses a lot. You got a new coaching staff in there. Jim Harbaugh left for the NFL. Sharon Moore is going to be replacing him. You lose a lot of starters from last year that are now playing on Sunday, so they're going to be replacing a lot also. But the thing about Michigan is that they're already good when it comes to the interior of their O-line and D-line, that you're not really concerned about that because that's their bread and butter. That's the identity of their program. The problem with Michigan is that you don't know how good their quarterback play is going to be. So if you end up getting better quarterback play out of Will Rogers than what Michigan gets out of Alex Orji or whoever they have playing quarterback in this game, I think you potentially could walk away with a potential upset since you are playing at home and your offense may be a little bit more capable than Michigan. That's if they don't get decent quarterback play. Now, if Michigan gets decent quarterback play, they can throw the football when they need to. They're going to be able to run the football down your throat. Okay, your run defense is not going to be able to slow down Michigan's rushing attack. I don't care what names you Washington fans try to throw at me. Michigan is just a different animal when you allow them to establish the ground game, man, because as we've seen in the past, they got no problem imposing their will up against you up front. And their second half schedule is a little bit tough, okay? You got Iowa on the road, and then you got a bye week, and then you got to go on the road again and play Indiana. Then you got a really tough 4-game slate playing USC on the road at Penn State. You got UCLA, then Oregon on the road. That's really tough. And there's a good chance that you possibly could lose 3 of those last couple of games to USC, Penn State, and Oregon. So if you're Washington, you do have the capability to overachieve, and maybe you get to a 9-win season. I think 10 wins is pushing things, but I think realistically, your floor is 5-7. Your ceiling is being an 8-win team. If I had to give you a prediction right now between that, I probably would go 7-5. I do think that Jedd Fisch is capable with the staff that he has in place of being able to have success right away. Plus, you're able to avoid playing some of the big boys of this conference until later on in the season. You got Michigan fairly early, but you get them at home. Going on the road to play Penn State and Oregon are way tougher games than you playing Michigan at home. Michigan is going to be a good team. I don't think they're going to be a pushover, but with you playing them at home, it doesn't make that game as tough as what it is you having to play Penn State and Oregon. And then you also have to play USC at home also, which we know USC is going to be really good offensively, and their defense is going to be improved also. I think for Washington, in 2 to 3 years, they should be able to compete for this conference as they improve on the line of scrimmage. Well, going into this year, man, I think if they could have a 7-win season, that would be a massive accomplishment for them, especially with their over-under win total being only 6.5 wins. I probably would leave that one alone because I could see them being a 6-win team, but I also could see them being a 7-win team. So that's one of those over-under bets I probably wouldn't touch, because they could go either way. Jedd Fisch isn't really known as being one of those guys that you hire him and right out the bat, he turns around your program. He's one of those coaches that he has to rebuild things. He's kind of like a Matt Rule in a sense. Once you get to year 2, year 3, then you can expect big things out of him. But at the same time, with the way that their schedule lines up, they could easily be 5-0. Once you get to 5-0, you got to find a couple of wins on that schedule. And I definitely can see you beating Iowa. Like, yeah, they're going to be better up front than you, but I don't think Iowa's still going to have an offense. And any time that wins with all defense and no offense, listen, I'm always going to like your chances if you're Washington. Indiana, they're kind of in the same situation as you, but a lot worse. They pretty much just bring a whole team from the transfer portal. They're trying to make just shit stick on the wall. And Penn State and Oregon, you got no chance. UCLA, you could win that game. That's a game that could go either way. But for the most part, I think Washington isn't going to be as bad as what you may think. Because before I started doing research on Washington, I was watching my boy College Football with Sam do his Big Ten record predictions. And I was like, Washington at 7-5, with everything they lose and the questions they have on the offensive line, and people are nagging about USC not being tough that front. But now look at their schedule, and I'm like, at least your tougher games that are on the road or later in the season. So at least you can get the 5-0 by beating up on, mid or below average teams. And then when you do end up playing the big teams, even if you do lose, you still have enough games in there that are winnable, like Iowa, Indiana, and UCLA, that can get you to 7-8 wins potentially. So I think that Washington, their first season in the Big Ten, I think they're going to be a decent squad. I see them as a middle-of-the-pack team. I don't see them becoming a 9-10 win team because you just don't have it up front to do that. But I'm a little bit surprised of how easy their schedule is, how manageable it is, and I don't really think it's going to be a rough season for them. Of course, it's going to be, weird watching a team that was just in the national championship, that had multiple back-to-back double-digit winning seasons under the stud that is Kalen DeBoer, but I don't think Jeff Fisher's going to be too bad. Good coaching staff. You got some talent when it comes to your skill positions on offense and on defense. You just are lacking what you need to be a Big Ten championship contender up front.